right, so thank you everybody, welcome. This is the DropTheDis, we're calling it our Human Rights Panel Forum. We are here today to have a great conversation and hopefully leave our city in a better place than it was before we started. Before we thank our panelists, which obviously we couldn't be doing this without you, thank you guys so much. I do want to thank our partners. First of all, we're in the Clubhouse right now. We're in the River Room. I'd like to thank the Clubhouse. We do not have a weekend membership. They made this happen for us. They're a great organization, and Joy is here on her day off, making sure that this goes off with the least amount of hitches as possible. So thank you to the Clubhouse. Thank you to Fat Mans. Thank you to the Usry family for feeding everybody. Obviously, a panel is always better with food beforehand. And so thank you to Fat Mans. Thank you to Augusta Meme. Thank you to Marcus. He's helping us promote this whole thing. Marcus and the Augusta Meme Instagram account have been super active in the civil rights movements going on right now. We would like to support you, Marcus, any way we can. Thank you to Brandon Dawson, WJBF News Channel 6, for covering this story and for helping us to spread this message of this panel, as big as we possibly can. Thank you to Jeff Haas. Jeff Haas is our producer for today. Jeff Haas is volunteering his time right now. He did not have a great morning, but he made it here anyways. We really appreciate Jeff. And of course, thank you to our panelists. Without you guys, there's no way we could have this great conversation. We're gonna introduce the panelists one by one really quickly, and then we're gonna go into our first topic. So first, I wanna introduce Mr. Ray Montana. Mr. Ray Montana, you're the CEO of the Street Justice Council. You've been a forward marcher and mover in the local Black Lives Matter movement, as well as regionally, I understand as well. It's
Absolutely.
a pleasure to have you and your perspective here today.
Absolutely, and I thank you, and I thank you kindly for being here at this time.
Dr. Todd Powell-Williams, thank you for being here. Dr. Todd Powell-Williams is a professor of criminology at Augusta University. He studies police interactions with civilians and especially protests, and has been working with the Richmond County Sheriff's Office to do his research. We're really excited to hear what you have to say. Dr. Williams, thank you so much for being here.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. I think it's probably the most important thing we have going on right now.
And I will give a shout out to Eli Francis, who connected me to Dr. Williams. Next, Captain Charles Mitchell with the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. Thank you so much for being here, Mr. Mitchell. I understand you have been in law enforcement for over 20 years now, and I understand you also teach seminars. You've been doing panels like this before. It's great to see somebody like you so interactive in this community, and it's really great with everything going on to see the Sheriff's Office represented in such a great way.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity too.
And finally, of course, former Mayor Deke Copenhaver, principal of Copenhaver Consulting, author of The Changemaker. That's a Forbes best-selling book, or an Amazon #1 bestseller, is that right? Deke Copenhaver, friend of DropTheDis. He is one of the reasons we're able to be here today doing this panel. His support is extremely appreciated. Thank you, Deke, for being here.
Well, thank you guys for doing this. Really, racial reconciliation was a priority of mine for 9 years in office, and in the private sector, it's the same thing. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
And with no further ado, we're gonna start at Mr. Ray Montana. Mr. Montana, I've got a question for you, and then panelists, if you would like to add in after his 2 minutes, please raise your hand, and I will notate the order that we'll have you guys speaking in, and of course, Jeff will keep your mics hot. So the first question we have for you, Mr. Ray Montana, we're all here today talking about this Black Lives Matter movement. You have been a foremost mover in that, like we said earlier, regionally even. Can you give us some background and history of the movement and what has changed over time? And then I'd like you to finish with, what is the Black Lives Matter movement representing today, both in Augusta and nationwide?
Okay, I would gladly answer those questions. dealing with the history of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Black Lives Matter movement is an organized movement advocating for nonviolent civil disobedience in protest against incidents of police brutality against citizens like myself. The key people that started that organization was Sean King, DeRay Mickelson, Jonetta Elzer, Tef Poe, and Erica Gardner. The founders are Alicia Garcia, Patrice Coyers, and Opal Tonette. For me, the Black Lives Matter movement, when it first started a few years back, and all the local news stations came to me concerning the Black Lives Matter movement, saying that I was the face for the Black Lives movement here in Augusta, Georgia. At that time, I did decline that I was the face for the Black Lives Matter movement here in Augusta. My reasons for saying that I was not the face of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Augusta, because when it first started, the organization, perhaps, I wouldn't say the organization, but the movement did not have any structure. And I believe in structure, I believe in following protocol, and I believe in nonviolence protests and peaceful protests when it comes to issues that we face in our community. So during that time when Black Lives Matter first was originated, it wasn't structured right for me, and I had my own movement going. And to me, Black Lives is the reason that street justice is the movement, and that's the name of my organization.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, or what, do you want me to go a little bit deeper into?
I would like to do one kind of addendum as far as what does the movement look like today?
The movement today looks profound. It looks achieving. It looks like we're actually coming together on one accord, not just with the black race, but with all races. Because for us in our organization, in the organization that I represent, we believe that humanity over race is actually the case. And to me, the movement is actually making an impact throughout this city, this state, and internationally.
I'd like to direct a follow-up question about what you just said to Captain Mitchell. Obviously, there's so many different examples of why the Black Lives Matter movement is important and why the street justice movement that you created is relevant to what we're talking about. Now, I'd like to talk from the sheriff's office perspective. What changes have you seen since you've been in the Richmond County Sheriff's Office that you think the Black Lives Matter movement, one, would appreciate, but also two, what do you think we still need to do as far as what you have seen personally?
Well, changes, I think we're handling it pretty well, especially during, the demonstrations. Our major concern when it comes to these protests is it doesn't get violent or we get outside agitators. That becomes our problem. And it's really hard to separate when they're mixed in with the group, to separate them out. If you want to have a peaceful protest in Augusta, our sheriff backs it 100%. If you're going to turn into breaking windows and all the violence, then that becomes our problem. That becomes a law enforcement problem. And I think the problem that we have is it's hard for our younger deputies to go in there and separate the two. So innocence can sometimes get hurt in the middle of it. But I don't think in the protests that we had, especially with the Black Lives Matter, we haven't had any incidents so far.
And do you think the sheriff's office response has contributed to the fact that there haven't been any incidents?
I do. One of the policies that the sheriff set forth is you'll never see us in riot gear. We'll be out there in the crowds. We walk with them, we march with them, and we talk to them. Just recently, we had 2 officers lay down on the ground with them. And that some of the officers got upset about that, but why? So I think that makes a difference.
And Dr. Williams, from your perspective, you study police policy. What kind of effect can putting policies like, let's say, not having riot gear on, let's say empathizing with people and working with the movement rather than being a force against the movement, what kind of a change does that create as far as an effect?
You're talking about the police facilitating the
That's
protest?
right. That's
like
right.
Upholding their constitutional duties? Yes.
That's
Yes.
right. Yes.
Well, and I'm not trying to be facetious when I say it that way. It's an oath that they take, and having studied this quite a bit over the last 15 years, I can tell you that's an oath that most law enforcement officers take very seriously. Also, it's one of the things that they can effectively do. Just given the nature of crime, investigations are difficult. Crimes coming to their attention is difficult. Crime fighting is one of the things they do, but given the nature of crime, they can't really do it that well or 100%. What they can do 100% of the time is not infringe on our civil rights. Like, they have absolute agency there. But I can say that, it can function a number of ways, but I would argue that, facilitating lawful protest can serve not only the groups involved in grassroots mobilization, but can also, to a degree, not only serve the authorities, and maybe that's not the best way to put it, but it certainly makes it a lot more predictable for them, right? If they can anticipate what sort of crowd is going to be there, if they can anticipate what sorts of actors might be there, it allows them to sort of prepare for contingencies. But I would say that, beyond that, when the police overplay their hand, like they have in a number of jurisdictions where the protests have either become violent or where people often not aligned directly with the protest, agents provocateur have broken windows and things like that. When the police overplay their hands, and this is one of the things that we know from studying social movements, is there's this irony of social control, right? Where they start launching tear gas and cracking heads. Fewer people aren't going to come out in the streets the next day. More people are going to come out. This is almost a given. It's about as close to a law as we have in social movements, is that repressive tactics have blowback and often produce very ironic, contradictory outcomes. So what I'm getting at is that they have an interest in facilitating these protests because it makes it a lot more predictable for them, aside from the fact that it's in line with their constitutional charge. So they have an interest in doing this. And as we've seen, this is what they've done. And, I applaud them for that.
All right. And Deke, I know I saw you make a motion.
Yeah, I'd just like to say how proud I am of our local law enforcement. And all of our demonstrations locally have been peaceful. And I think that's been the tone set by the demonstrators as well as law enforcement. So I'm just extremely proud of the way things have been handled here. I want that message to get out because I think that most of the protests nationally have been peaceful. And sometimes if you just watch the news, it looks like America's burning. But it's important to recognize that most of these demonstrations have been peaceful.
And so, Deke, I actually did have a question for you as well. You took office, I believe, in 2004. Is that right?
2005.
2005. Elected in 2004, took office in 2005. Now, when you ran for office, to be frank, race was a big part of your campaign. How has the racial element in Augusta changed since then, or is it the same issues that you saw back when you were mayor?
It's interesting that you should ask that question, and I was having a conversation about that earlier, that at the grassroots level, I believe that we've made great progress on race relations. And sometimes the politics can look more racially tinged, but I was not concerned at all about our local demonstrations not being peaceful. I think about, Arts in the Heart of Augusta is one of my favorite festivals. 90,000+ people coming to downtown Augusta every year to celebrate arts, culture, and diversity. And to the best of my knowledge, we've never had an incident there. That's the Augusta that I see, which I was proud to serve for 9 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray Montana, I've got a question. We see the Black Lives Matter movement on the news. We see it on all the mainstream channels. So my question is this movement specifically political?
And also, why or why not?
Yeah, why or not, yeah.
To me, it's not specifically political. Why I would say that, it has a lot of political standards because we deal with a lot of racism in our politics. But I believe that the stand, I wouldn't say that it's political, it's more personal. It's more personal. For myself and for our community, we barely even see the political side, and that's something that we have lack of, and we need to bring that to fruition in our communities. But when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, it's not political for us, it's a personal issue. And it has been embedded from generation to generation to generation, and we're sick and tired of it. And enough is enough. and the time is now.
Okay. I want to open the floor up if anybody has any more comments on this topic of explaining and giving background on the movement. Otherwise, we will take a pause and begin our next topic. Okay. Dr. Williams?
Let me get my thoughts together here.
I've seen you writing. I've been hoping you would say something.
So, when Mr. Montana says that the Black Lives Matter movement for him is personal, it's not yet political. I'm assuming that at some point it may become political, and that's really the goal. This is a relatively nascent, sort of new movement. It was founded in 2015, as Ray said. And so, movements like this, especially movements that are pushing against the sort of dominant hegemonic aspects and white supremacist aspects of American culture, if they're going to facilitate any change, they have to transcend the personal into the political realm, right? So we're going to have to move from the grassroots realm into the organizational and institutional and political realm in order to make any changes. You can't change policy without access to those levers. Absolutely. It won't happen, or at least it wouldn't happen in any meaningful, accountable way.
Well, I totally agree with you. If I can, I totally agree with you. When I state that it's on a personal level, when it comes to our community and to myself, it truly is. But it becomes a political issue when we got to change the policies and the procedures and create the sanctions and the criminal sanctions against police creating brutality against the citizens. So it does turn political. So we got to take the personal and turn it into political. I totally agree.
And so let me just. I'm sorry.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to highlight something here historically in relation to movements and protests.
Okay. And then we've got Deke after that.
So one of the things that we sort of know by looking at protest historically is that, change is often difficult. Absolutely. And can take a lot of time. Because this is such a new movement, they've had to really push back. Not only are they trying to sort of change the framings and understandings of blackness in American society, but they're trying to humanize black people. And certainly when you're pushing back against the history of this country of 500 years of oppression of black people, that becomes something. This is a tall order, not something that can't happen. As a matter of fact, I have tremendous faith in the young people that are spearheading this. But it's going to be a long road. This is a long game.
And let's get our follow-up with Deke. Thank you.
I would say that really, to me, all politics are local. And I think if we're going to see real change, it's got to start at the local level. Ray was asking me before about me considering another run for office, and I said that the issue that I have with running for higher office is with the two-party political system, if you start taking the party money on either side, you have to toe a party line. And I'm not comfortable doing that because I'm independent and I like to think for myself. But I think it really begins at the local level. That is very important. And I believe I had a Trojan horse theory when I ran for office. I'm like, somebody's got to get on the inside to really focus on pushing good ideas and really bringing the community together. So that's why I ran in the first place.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This is going to conclude our first topic.